descriptions inspired me with strange feelings. This was the discussion of the Romans and the Greeks. And was man indeed at once so powerful, so virtuous and magnificent, yet so vicious and base? He appeared at one time a mere scion of the evil principle, and another as all that can be conceived as noble and godlike. To be a great and virtuous man appeared to the highest honor that can befall a sensitive being. To be base and vicious, as many on record have been, appeared the lowest degradation, a condition more abject than that of the blind mole or a harmless worm. For a long time I could not conceive how one man could go forth to murder his fellow, or why there were laws and governments, but when I heard details of vice and bloodshed, my wonder ceased, and I turned away with disgust and loathing. This is true. This is before he has intervened with these people. Let's continue. Every conversation of the cottagers was now open new wonders to me. While I listened to the instructions which Felix bestowed upon the Arabian, the strange system of human society was explained to me. I heard of the division of property, of immense wealth and squalid poverty, of rank, descent, and noble blood. Continue. These words induced me to turn toward myself. I learned that the possessions most esteemed by your fellow creatures were high and unsullied descent united with riches. A man might be respected with only one of these advantages, but with either he was considered, except in very rare instances, as a vagabond and a slave, doomed to waste his powers for profits of the chosen few. Oh, what was I? Oh, of my creation and creator I was absolutely ignorant, but I knew that I possessed no money, no friends, no kind of property. I was, besides, endued with a figure hideously deformed and loathsome. I'm using that line when I talk to my children these days. I was not even of the same nature as man. I was more agile than they, and could subsist longer on coarser diet. I bore the extremes of heat and cold with less injury to my frame. My stature far exceeded theirs. When I looked around, I saw and heard none like me. Was I, then, a monster, a blot upon the earth, from which all men fled, and whom all men disowned? I cannot describe to you the agony of these reflections inflicted upon me. I tried to dispel them, but sorrow only increased with knowledge. Oh, that I had forever maintained in my native wood, nor known, nor felt, beyond the sensation of hunger, thirst, and heat. It's like he wants to shove himself back in the womb. It's like he wants to never have experienced the civilized life, even of those who lived in this cottage.
Some of that seemed like it was right out of part one of the Discourse for Inequality, when he's talking about how he can eat coarser diets and he can he's more agile than them. I think that's one of the things that Rousseau pointed out about natural man, was that physically he was above what we are now.
Yes, no, he was kind of ruthless or dangerous, a very dangerous being for this reason. And let me just read one. Thank you, that's excellent. Oh, what a strange nature is knowledge. It clings to the mind when it is once seized on it like a lichen on the rock. I wished sometimes to shake off all thought and feeling, but I learned that there was but one means to overcome the sensation of pain, and that was death, a state which I feared, yet did not understand. So here we get the monster completely beset with the divisions in his consciousness. Right? And he basically says there's two options. Retreat or die. Retreat somehow back to those glorious moments of pre-consciousness where you were undivided because you did not know the world and did not understand how to differentiate yourself from the world. That's one option. The other option is to tie some millstone around your neck and throw yourself into the lake. Because death also puts an end to the painful divisions in your consciousness. Oblivion in either direction. You've often heard it said that little children look a lot like old people. I don't know if you've ever heard that. But the idea here is that little children and really, really old people, like right after you die, that old, enjoy the same tranquility of soul that the natural man could experience. So recognize what Shelley is doing here. She is saying the monster is a hopelessly divided creature, and the only way, the only options that seem available to him are to wipe out your consciousness, either before it came to exist, but it's hard to undo that, or die. Those are the options. And those really seem to be the monster's options. I don't want to cut to the end of the book, but go to the last stinking page of the book. I'm not going to tell you how it ends, because that would spoil the whole thing. But it does involve Victor dying. It doesn't end the way young Frankenstein ends. His last, the penultimate paragraph, but soon he cried with sad and solemn enthusiasm, this is the monster, I shall die, and what I now feel be no longer felt. Soon the burning miseries will be extinct. I shall ascend my funeral pile triumphantly and exult in the agony of the torturing flames. The light of that conflagration will fade away. My ashes will be swept into the sea by the winds. My spirit will sleep in peace of it, or if it thinks, it will surely not think thus. Farewell. And the monster wants to be whole again. And he sees death as the doorway to that reality. We've seen Victor have much the same experience, and let's go back to this at the beginning of book 2. So basically, right now our theme is, how does Shelley think you can overcome the divisions that exist in the human soul in societies? Her first option is death. Her second option is explored by Victor at the beginning of volume 2. I have this at page 91 in mind. This is going to be maybe halfway through your chapter. No, near the end of the chapter. 4 paragraphs that sometimes I could cope. So think about what's going on here in volume 2 at the beginning. Victor goes back home. Brother's dead. Maid gets convicted of murdering brother. He has to live, and this is very difficult for Victor, with the guilt of having been responsible for his brother's death, and now his maid's death, and the monster being out on the loose. He's pretty sure that the monster is responsible for these things, which means that he is indirectly responsible for these things. Now, he has a loving family, a loving, we'll have to also say, grieving family. And he spends some time with his loving, grieving family. He has his more than sister at home. But what does Victor do? In order to kind of get away from it all, the adult responsibility and conflicts that exist there because of his actions, he goes for a walk. Right? And page, sometimes I could cope. 64. Here we have Victor's way of dealing with the miseries that result from knowledge and responsibility. Sometimes I could cope with the sullen despair that overwhelmed me. But sometimes the whirlwind passions in my soul drove me to seek by bodily exercise and by a change of place, some relief from my intolerable sensations. It was during an access of this kind that I suddenly left my home, and bending my steps toward the near alpine valleys, sought in the magnificence, in the eternity of such scenes, to forget myself and my ephemeral because human sorrows. My wanderings were directed toward the valley of the Chamonix. I had visited it frequently during my boyhood. 6 years had I passed since then. I was a wreck, but naught had changed in those savage and enduring scenes. Continue. I performed the first part of my journey on horseback. Skip a few lines. The immense mountains and precipices that overhung me on every side, the sound of the river raging among the rocks, and the dashing of the waterfalls around, spoke of a power mighty as omnipotence. And I ceased to fear and to bend before any being less almighty than that which had created and ruled the elements, here displayed in their most terrific guise. I ascended higher, the valley assumed a more magnificent and astonishing character, and so on and so on and so on. Victor loses himself too in an oblivion, it seems. The oblivion, the beauty, the magnificence of nature itself. And in the penultimate paragraph of this chapter, he talks about a long-lost sense of pleasure that is almost, well, he compares it here to childhood, that is almost pre-conscious. And what happens? A tingling, long-lost sense of pleasure often came across me during this journey. That's his happiness. That's his wholeness. Yet some turn in the road, some new object suddenly perceived and recognized, reminded me of the days gone by and were associated with the light heart gaiety of boyhood. The very winds whispered in soothing accents, and maternal nature bade me weep no more. He was once again happy. Next words. Then again, the kindly influence ceased to act. I found myself fettered again to grief and indulging in all the misery of reflection. What happened? He remembered. You ever have a good time and then remember, oh yeah, I have a lot of things to do? Victor. Your oblivion ends up being disturbed by the despairing thoughts of your own misery. He calls it the misery of reflection. And then what happens? Then I spurred on my animal, striving to forget the world and my fears, and more than all, myself, in a more desperate fashion. I alighted and threw myself on the grass, weighed down by horror and despair. He tries to go deeper and deeper into the mountains. Exhaustion exceeds the extreme fatigue of body and mind which I had endured. For a short space of time, I remained at the window watching the pallid lightning that were played above Mount Blanc and listening to the rushing of the Arve, which pursued its noisy way beneath. The same lulling sounds acted as a lullaby to my too keen sensations. When I placed my head upon my pillow, sleep crept over me, and I felt it as it came and blessed the giver of oblivion. Here's the second solution to the problem of division: sleep. Actually, the second solution is losing yourself in nature, but that will be disturbed by thoughts. The third solution is sleep, oblivion. The one time you can be free from divisions and happy is when sleep creeps over you. And the nice thing about sleep is that it's a little bit like death, but you wake up. Sleep equals death, but it ends.
It completely depends on your dreams, too.
What's that?
I said that completely depends on your dreams. You'll be divided in your dreams.
I suppose. That never happens in mine. But I hear that people have that problem. So here's the theme, right? All of man's attempts to rise above his animal nature lead to man being miserable. And the monster and Victor are the ones who are all too conscious of this problem. Human beings have potential, they can create things, and all those potentials and those creations do is make us aware of what we lack, make us aware of our own pains and suffering. Has civilization been good for man? It has made him miserable. And this is the claim later on. This is not also in what we read. Volume 3, Chapter 2, I understand. It's one of the reasons it's hard to teach these books, because you want to talk about the whole thing at the same time. Where Victor, and you'll find out what's going on here later on, but it's in a paragraph that begins with, "We passed a considerable period at Oxford." And about the last half of it, "For a moment my soul was elevated from its debasing and miserable fears to contemplate the divine ideas of liberty and self-sacrifice, of which these sights were the monuments and the remembrancers. For an instant I dared to shake off my chains, and to look around me with a free and lofty spirit. But the iron had eaten into my flesh, and I sank again, trembling and hopeless, into my miserable self." There's no way out. He was born free, perhaps, but he's in chains. And those chains dig in deeper. And he will be, and he is known throughout the novel as the monster's slave. So the monster is a reflection of Victor's problem. Victor is miserable because of knowledge that he has. The monster is miserable because of knowledge he has. Each of them are men of sorrow because they are men of society. Victor has created his double in creating the monster. And thus we get, I think, when you look at part 1 or volume 1 of Frankenstein and volume 2 of Frankenstein, when you add them together, you get Shelley's, greatest theme in this book, which is that modern science and human misery proceed together. As human beings seek, like Victor seeks, to become lords and possessors of nature, to assert control over the nature around him, human beings become more hopelessly divided against themselves, become more miserable. And the precise result of that misery is what Volume 3 ends up being concerned with. So let's just actually step back one moment here and think a little bit more about the monster's situation. Okay, so the monster, he gains consciousness, he lives in a hovel, he gets to know language, he understands a little bit about history, he tries to introduce him into the family of cottagers, they reject him. he confronts Victor and says, look, I want you to make me a woman. Right, and what does he ask that the woman be like?
Like him?
And what does that mean in this particular case?
Gruesome? Or a monster?
Hideous. Why does he want her to be hideous?
So that she'll also feel that same rejection, they can have solace with each other.
Yes, now this is a very interesting, observation, right? Now just imagine, all right, so let's say I'm old and ugly and breaking down. Let's just imagine what this would be like. And I came up to Victor Frankenstein. I understand you can make me a young lady, or you can make me a lady here. I might order something besides an old, broken down woman, right? Victor is asked to make an old, broken down woman, right? As hideous a monster as he. This is how deeply the monster has accepted society's view of him. Only someone as gruesome as I is suitable for me. It is not possible, it is not conceivable, it seems, that he could create a woman who was beautiful, but nevertheless could be brought to love the monster. This is what all the movies about Frankenstein always end up involving. They end up involving, not all of them, not the 1931 one, but they involve a beautiful woman being tempted by the potentially beautiful soul of the monster. And because you've probably heard that what really matters isn't exterior beauty, but inner beauty. And that's what the monster has. He has a lot of inner beauty. He just is kind of hideous on the outside. And so the beautiful woman can fall in love with the monster because what matters is inner beauty, not exterior beauty. The monster will have none of that in the book. He doesn't entertain the idea that a beautiful woman could ever like him or ever suffer to live with him. He needs someone as hideous as he. And that is, maybe the ultimate, that sad commentary for the monster on how he has accepted society's view of him. He can't even dream outside of society's view of him. He can't even hope to exceed and educate beyond society's view of him. He is hideous. It's not that he appears hideous, he is. And because he is, I would say, enslaved to society's view of him in that respect, he could never be happy except through death. It's a very sad moment. It's so sad, I think, as I say in the book, that those who have made other works of art based on it can't stomach it. Even Mel Brooks's version of Young Frankenstein, the monster gets Gilda Radner. Would you like to go for a roll in the hay? I think she says to the monster. Anyways, that's another matter. Does anyone have any questions about the monster, or book 2, or volume 2? All right, well, there you go. I tried. We'll see you on Thursday for Rousseau, social contract. Stop this thing. Did it work?
Your head wasn't cut off.
Maybe it should have been.